Joining me now live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida is Adonis Hoffman. He's CEO of the Advisory Council and Chairman of Business in the Public Interest. So Adonis, this hearing started a little late. We saw some technical difficulties a few minutes ago, but I want to get your reaction to what you've heard so far.
Well, Elaine, first of all, thank you for having me on. This hearing is number 6 in a series of hearings that the subcommittee on antitrust and administrative law in the House of Representatives has had over the last 2 years. And what we have now, ostensibly this was to focus on competition, but what we've seen so far is that on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats, there's been a concern about a number of issues that go beyond competition. For example, privacy, concerns about the influence of these technology companies on American elections, and also the impact of these companies that they have in countries such as China, and the influence that Russia might have, for example, in the American economy. So while it has been slated for focus on competition and antitrust, we see now that the concerns by members of Congress go well beyond those areas. And
you mentioned China. Mark Zuckerberg called Facebook an American company. Alphabet CEO was also asked about China. What are we to learn from this line of questioning?
Well, I think we should learn that there are some very serious concerns on the part of leading members of Congress about the interaction that technology companies, particularly Google and Facebook, have with respect to the Chinese area. So a number of members of Congress have expressed the concerns, for example, about the use of AI, artificial intelligence, in the Chinese context. Just the mere presence of a company like Google in China. And very legitimate concerns given the national security general debate in this country leading up to an election, where we see the relationships between the United States and China have taken a turn for a more chilling effect in our relationships. And of course, those come on the heels of the actions with respect to Huawei, TikTok, and other Chinese firms. They're not unrelated.
Adonis, I want to get your observations of this blockbuster lineup. It's a virtual hearing, and the first time, really, that Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has testified before Congress. What are your impressions of this moment?
Well, it's interesting, Elaine. Technology regulation, I've written about this extensively, is a complicated matter. So on the one hand, Americans, and I would say those in the global community as users, as consumers, really value the services that these companies provide, whether it's Google, Amazon. The services are just fantastic, and yet there's a trade-off. And the trade-off seems to be where we have the problem. So there's a trade-off with respect to data security and privacy, trade-off with respect to competition, and how some of these companies, because of their sheer scale and size, how they suppress competition among new entrants or third-party users, for example, third-party sellers in the Amazon platform. So it's not a cut-and-dried issue. There's no black and white here, and there are certainly beneficial arguments. There's sort of positives on both sides of the discussion. This is not an easy regulatory decision or pathway for Congress or for the Federal Trade Commission or for the Justice Department, because there are certainly benefits on both sides of the discussion. And I think that's really what I take away from this. It's a complicated matter where you have some very legitimate concerns about competition on the one hand, and then legitimate concerns about privacy and the services that these companies provide on the other. This is not the last iteration on these issues, and regulation of technology is going to be an ongoing discussion in the United States and certainly globally with the actions by the Europeans and others.
Great insight. Adonis Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us from Florida.